It's time for the Florida primary, so we're getting the view from both sides of the aisle. Leaders from the Florida Democratic Party and the Republican Party of Florida, each joining us remotely to talk about the election in Northeast Florida. First, we're focused on the big announcement this week. Joe Biden invites Kamala Harris to the campaign as his running mate, all on This Week in Jacksonville. And thank you so much for joining us today. We are rapidly coming up on National Political Party Convention, and so it was time for a presidential candidate announcement. We heard it this week from Joe Biden. Political analyst Rick Mullaney is joining us now, the director of the JU Public Policy Institute. And so, Rick, Joe Biden announced Kamala Harris as his pick to be his running mate, expected and also pretty historic at the same time, applauded by many, but also quickly denounced as a poor choice by the president and his allies.
Certainly to be expected. And Kent, really in the end, it's about the top of the ticket. It's not about the VP pick. But this year in particular, that VP pick may be very important, in part because of Joe Biden's age and also because people are concerned about his mental sharpness. There's also another issue here, and that is 2024. Whoever the pick is will be, if Joe Biden wins, will be the presumptive nominee come 2024. And so this was a very significant pick. If you look back historically, that pick typically doesn't make that big of a difference. Some argue that Lyndon Johnson may have made the difference in Texas in 1960. More often you see oftentimes it can hurt the ticket, such as Thomas Eagleton in 72 or maybe Sarah Palin in 2008. In general, the rule is do no harm with that pick. This year's pick may be a little more significant.
So, Rick, you just said something there I think people may not be tracking. You just said if Biden wins, then in 2024, after one term, his vice president might be the presumptive nominee. You think he's a one-term president if he were elected?
I actually do. He would be 81 if he were running again. Some people are questioning them. There was a poll recently that says many people, for whatever reason, feel he may not even finish this term. But if he does, I think most believe he's a one-term president, meaning that with Kamala Harris, presumptively, she could be the face of the Democratic Party. Ironically, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but in 2024, you could literally be having two women with parents from India against each other. One Kamala Harris, one Nikki Haley. Could be an interesting dynamic. Interesting dynamic in 2024.
Yeah, you're right. So let's not get ahead of ourselves.
That's ahead of ourselves.
But that's something to think about down the line. So given critics of former Vice President Biden's stamina and mental acuity and all that, and is that even fair to factor in as people look at what they're going to be voting on in the next, well, come November?
Kent, I think this year it's more important than most. And I think that people are careful to talk about this, but you saw it on the debate stage in the Democratic primary. You've seen it since. Some people are concerned about Joe Biden's age. He would be the oldest in history come January. He'd be 78 if he were to win. Also, they are concerned about the mental aspects of this. So therefore, this pick, many view as more significant in the past, in the sense that many people will simply ask the question, can you picture this VP as president? Do they have the resume? Do they have the background? Do they have the experience? So an important pick from that perspective.
A lot of people were weighing in on that before we heard who Joe Biden was going to announce as his running mate, because they said that was important. So defenders of the Kamala Harris pick say a VP candidate doesn't guarantee winning that person's state, so Democrats aren't really worried about California. But how does Harris help Democrats win in states like Florida?
Well, first of all, the Democrats are going to win California, right. And they're going to win New York. But the VP pick really isn't about a particular state or geographic region, particularly for Kamala Harris. Part of that pick is aimed at really the black vote. That black vote made all the difference for Barack Obama. They did not turn out for Hillary Clinton. And they made the difference for Joe Biden getting this.
South Carolina,
make no mistake. And so part of that is energizing the black vote. Part of that is energizing the base because it's a turnout election. You have to turn out your voters. Plus, there's a hope on the Democratic side that they can appeal to some of those moderates and independents. They didn't go Elizabeth Warren, who some might view as more progressive, but the Kamala Harris pick is designed for turnout, the black vote, and hopefully get some of those moderates.
So the president terms Senator Harris as far left. Then there are Democrats who are saying she's too centrist. Does that play well for being the VP candidate, or does that hurt her cause somehow?
Kent, I think there's going to be a raging battle over trying to define her. And part of it is that she does not really have a policy or ideological identity. And by that I mean in the Democratic primary, you could see a clear lane. With Joe Biden and Amy Klobuchar, they were more that centrist lane. With Warren Sanders, and you could see with Elizabeth Warren and they were Bernie Sanders, excuse me, they were clearly that progressive lane. She was harder to define. At times, she would be far left when she wanted to abolish insurance, for example, on health care. And when she got pushback, she tried to go back the other direction. on her record in criminal justice. That was less progressive. When she got that pushback, she began to go to progressive. What you've seen with Kamala Harris is what Democrats might call flexibility. What you may see from the Republicans is they will claim that it's opportunistic, that she shifts around. She's very difficult to define in terms of ideology and policy, but make no mistake, she's smart. And she can perform well on the debate stage.
So let me show you some video here. Mr. Trump has got some campaign stops scheduled this coming week. 4 different states, all of them key to a re-election victory. They include being in Scranton, Pennsylvania. This is where Biden was born. And these events all taking place during the Democratic National Convention. So what do you think about, I guess, the gamesmanship or the strategy here to make that call by the campaign?
It's pretty much out of the Trump playbook. He's done it in the past. He did it during impeachment. He's done it at other times. If there is something significant going on in which he wants to draw attention away from it, he will have a competing event. With COVID-19, that becomes a little more challenging to do. He can't have the big crowds. He can't campaign in the same way. But he can try to have something that is a distraction or that changes the subject. Most likely, during next week or the week coming up, you're going to see the focus on the Democrats, and in the following week, the focus on the Republicans.
So let's shift our focus to local politics for some. This is something I brought up during this week. There's a specific Duval County campaign. It's for clerk of courts. All right, so there's an ad running now. It attacks Scott Wilson, the former city council president. It also touts Jody Phillips as the favored candidate, and then lists he's pro-Second Amendment, pro-life, pro-law enforcement, pro-Trump, all the other kind of major talking points. One of our viewers wants to know if you're running for that position, clerk of courts. Shouldn't you just have to say I'm pro-justice and I'll keep the court calendar in order and running smoothly? Why does it have to be so partisan on a race like that?
Couple points, Kent, it's pretty interesting. In the 40 years I've been working in Jacksonville looking at local races, you've never really seen a clerk's race quite like this one. A clerk's race is typically more akin to a judicial race in which it's about the rule of law. And the policy preferences of the candidates don't matter so much. It's are they competent? But there's obviously a different dynamic here. One of the dynamics that some people believe is the case is that Scott Wilson, as council president, really took on JEA. He called for the resignation of Zahn. He helped put a stop to the sale. He appointed a special committee to investigate what happened. And that has drawn some detractors. Some believe that the negative campaign against him is a result of his work as council president. And so therefore, instead of having 2 candidates that are talking about their competency in their office, that experience in the office, what you've seen is sort of a shift, a very negative campaign, and also trying to redefine the issue. Unlike really what we've seen in the past for this race.
Yeah, and I think it's a good question by this person who wants to know, why do I focus on that? I talked to a campaign consultant this week who said, yeah, but that being competent, that's not sexy. That's not, you know, so you find these other issues. So what we find is that there's still going to be an election this Tuesday. It's the Florida primary, and Rick and I certainly will be part of the coverage on Channel 4. Rick, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Ken.
All right, so coming up, Senator Joe Gruters, the elected chairman of the Republican Party of Florida. He's with us next on This Week in Jacksonville.
Jason Holyfield calls himself conservative. It's a hoax. Holyfield was a lifelong Democrat, and he acts like one. While Holyfield was a commissioner, spending soared and taxes skyrocketed. Jason Holyfield, lifelong Democrat who acts like a liberal. That's why the NRA, Governor DeSantis, and our sheriffs support Jennifer Bradley. Lifelong conservative Jennifer Bradley is pro-gun, pro-life, and pro-Trump. Jennifer Bradley for Florida Senate.
Liberal Scott Wilson is trying to fool us. He was caught on a secret trip with lobbyists to sell JEA. Wilson has 2 paychecks from taxpayers and voted to increase his own salary twice. His campaign is funded by Democrats who oppose President Trump because Wilson voted for Democrats to lead city council. We can't trust liberal Scott Wilson. But Republican Jody Phillips shares our conservative values: pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and pro-Trump. Jody Phillips for Clerk of Court.
We're seeing it again. The virus spreading out of control. The president once again failing to act. Joe Biden knows we need to listen to medical experts and take action now. That starts by expanding testing, calling for mask mandates nationwide starting immediately, and producing more protective gear here at home. Fighting this virus and rebuilding our economy will take a president who's ready to lead.
I'm Joe Biden, and I approve this message.
After a major storm,
you can count on JEA to safely restore power as quickly as possible, beginning with critical infrastructure, hospitals, shelters, and police and fire stations. Next, we put all of our resources into restoring power to neighborhoods and businesses. And we won't stop until every customer's outage is resolved. Because when the community you serve is home, there's more than power on the line. Learn more at JEA.com.
Kat Kamek's chickens coming home to roost. A DC insider, Kat's been over 10 years in Washington, where she wasted thousands of tax dollars on glitzy hotels and fancy restaurants. Now a DC special interest group is secretly bankrolling Kamek's campaign because they know Kat's for sale. Kat Kamek is the swamp. James St. George, doctor, businessman, outsider. He'll stand with Trump to drain the swamp.
I'm Dr. James St. George, and I approve this message.
Election 2020, Florida's primary night.
Be an informed voter.
On-air results as soon as polls close.
I've been in touch on the phone.
Alerts on every screen. And starting at 9, Election 2020, Florida's primary night. A special in-depth breakdown how the candidates finished in your neighborhood.
The 3 major counties we have in our area.
Election 2020, Florida's primary night. Tuesday at 9 on Channel 4, the local station. You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
It's always the highest voter turnout when you get to the presidential election every 4 years. That doesn't mean the primary elections a few months ahead of that aren't important. This morning, we're talking about the primary, and we begin on the Republican side of the field. I asked Republican Party of Florida Chairman Joe Gruters why Tuesday's primary is important to him and the GOP.
What we're doing is we're using this as a test run for the general election. You know, we have over 185 staffers on the ground. Throughout Florida, we have one represented almost basically in every single county. But basically, the goal is to make sure that our election day operations for the general will be there and be ready for and that's where we could iron out any kinks in this primary, whether it be the war rooms that we set up for poll watchers to call in with any type of issues, and really just as a dry test run. But we're excited about not only the primary, but the intensity of our voters have and the love they have for the President of the United States, Donald Trump, and we're ready to reelect him in November.
Chairman, one of those races near us, the primary is so big because there's so many candidates. I'm talking about Congressional District 3. That's where Congressman Ted Yoho has announced he's not running for re-election, and there's many candidates who are there, and it's gotten pretty fierce in terms of local advertising now. Is that something that RPOF, do you have to keep your hands off and stay away, or do you get involved in a fight like that?
We don't get involved, but we like to watch it. And listen, primaries are healthy for a party. I think we'll end up with having a great candidate emerge out of that race and end up being the next congressman from that district. But with 11 candidates, really you can go any way. You know, you have a couple of top tier candidates and they're really battling it out. And sometimes you don't like to see some of the negative ads. But however, I think overall, they've all run a strong race, and you're going to see a winner with anywhere between 21 to maybe 25% of the vote. And you have some late chargers coming in, but it's going to be exciting to see, and we're going to get behind whoever ends up winning that one to make sure that they win.
What kind of efforts is RPOF making in terms of getting people to the polls? Turnout so important, and obviously primary doesn't see the kind of turnout that the general election does. But as you mentioned, this is kind of dry run and see what your operation can do.
Well, that's exactly right. And that's where we're working with local county parties to make sure that they have the ability to, A, turn out their voters, but B, have everything set up so if anything happens, somebody needs to ride to the polls, basics up. If somebody sees something that's not working, so they can call up an office and get a live operator, getting those war rooms all set up to handle anything that can come along on election day. But it's this is a team event because obviously in the general in November, there's no second chances. So this is a great opportunity for us to really do a dry test run and get everything ready and prepared.
One of the things that I saw recently in Florida, there's a Trump bus tour going on. Now, we're months away from that, and that's a federal election, but there's an impact down the ballot that we talk about. So how would you explain that? Why is that important that right now President Trump has a campaign bus tour going on in the state of Florida ahead of this primary?
because Florida is the grand prize for both campaigns. And ultimately, you can't win a campaign from your basement. With our 185 staffers on the ground, you know, we made over 14 million voter contacts in the state of Florida since the shutdown happened. We literally are a well-oiled machine, and we're just absolutely cranking it down over there on the ground. And to give you a difference, and this is where the ground game and the operations, everything we're doing, including the bus tour, all comes into play. The Biden campaign, not only do they have the candidate sitting in the basement, but they've walked, let's say, 0 doors last week. They'll admit that. Actually, they're attacking us for walking doors. Our campaign hit 1 million doors on the ground. And what's going to happen, we know that this is not a persuasion campaign in November. You either like the president or you don't. And on top of that, down ballot candidates, we're all basically going to do as well as the president is on our side, and they'll do as well. The down ballot candidates for Democrats will do as well as Biden on their side. And so it's our job to get out the vote and make sure people turn out. And so that will be our focus.
So, Chairman, COVID-19 is clearly an issue that's going to be discussed, is being discussed. How does the Republican Party of Florida address that, whether it's our local races or across the state?
Well, listen, there's a lot of concern over COVID-19. And the great thing about being a Republican or being a voter in Florida is you have the ability to vote either by absentee ballot, by early voting, and by election day. And talking to people around the state where early voting is taking place right now, these election supervisors are doing a good job making sure booths are disinfected, making sure the safety precautions are there. And listen, if anybody has any concern about COVID-19, they should certainly request an absentee ballot. It's we here in Florida, we want to make it as easy as possible to vote, but as hard as possible to cheat. And it's and I think we've done a good job. We have the protections in place. We have we're going to have election integrity. You know, we had 2 bad apples in the last cycle, but they were both removed. So this cycle, I expect all 67 supervisors to do the job of the people, because it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or a Democrat. You want integrity. You want one person, one vote. And on top of that, you want one citizen, one vote. And I think that in Florida, we've established the protocols to make sure that happens.
Now, Gruters is running for re-election to the Florida State Senate to represent District 23. That's the Sarasota area. He's on the ballot in the general election November 3rd, but the Republican primary for that office was canceled. All right, so from the Democratic side of the field, we're welcoming Rosie Gonzalez Speers from Tallahassee. Her views on the primary day in the Sunshine State next on This Week in Jacksonville. Stay with us.
Congressman John Rutherford delivers results for Northeast Florida, working with President Trump to cut taxes for families and small businesses to get our economy going again, leading on lowering prescription drug prices, protecting coverage for pre-existing conditions, and holding the VA accountable for the health care our veterans deserve. Rutherford stands with law enforcement and will always defend the Constitution. That's why he's endorsed by the NRA and the Fraternal Order of Police. Congressman John Rutherford, conservative leadership.
I'm John Rutherford, and I approve this message.
Growing up in a community like Green Cove Springs shapes how you see the world. It makes you a better neighbor and a better listener. This town also gave me an appreciation for the people in our community, which is why Harrell & Harrell is focused on helping others in need. If you've been in an accident, you don't have to recover alone. We're with you. Harrell & Harrell. Call us. 251-1111. Don't settle for less than you deserve.
Joe Biden says,
if you elect me, your taxes are going to be raised, not cut.
That means middle-class families, small businesses, and seniors pay higher taxes. It's the biggest tax increase in history.
Citizenship for 11 million undocumented folks.
That means 11 million illegal immigrants competing for American jobs, eligible for free health care, Social Security, and Medicare. America can't afford Joe Biden.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
Lily, everyone in the house is online, and I can't get enough bandwidth to video chat with my book club.
Try 1 gig internet with AT&T Fiber. You get more bandwidth and HBO Max included, so everyone stays entertained.
So I can just watch the show instead of reading the book?
You know, if you turn on your subtitles, that's almost reading.
Get entertainment-grade 1 gig internet with AT&T Fiber. Now with HBO Max included. Bundle with AT&T TV for $89.98 a month for a year. Limited availability in select areas. Call 1-877, only ATT.
He's deployed to battlefields across the globe to defend our nation and put on a badge and protected the streets here at home. Now Republican Rob Hardwick is ready to lead again as St. Johns County Sheriff. Hardwick will work with our community to combat violent crime and battle the opioid epidemic. He'll always defend our constitutional rights and be accountable to the people. Battle-tested and ready to lead, Rob Hardwick is the trusted conservative for St. Johns County Sheriff.
James St. George and Kat Cammack are misleading voters. Court documents reveal St. George's medical malpractice, domestic violence, and affair resulting in an abortion. Kat Cammack was demoted by Ted Yoho and lied about her record. The conservative choice, Trump friend Judson Sapp, 100% pro-life, pro-gun, endorsed by President Trump's strongest allies. For Congress, Judson Sapp.
I'm Judson Sapp, and I approve this message.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
All right, admittedly, it's a mouthful if you say all of it, but it explains why we're talking with her. Rosie Gonzalez Speers is senior advisor for Down Ballot Elections at the Florida Democratic Party. We spoke via Zoom this week and discussed the excitement generated for Democrats when Kamala Harris was added to the top of the ticket.
Well, Ken, thank you so much for having me. Florida Democrats are extremely excited and fired up. We have been planning for this for a long time, but specifically in 2019, a lot of investment went into electorate expansion and vote-by-mail enrollment. And we are seeing that with an over 600,000 advantage over Republican vote-by-mail. And this election, this primary election specifically, is important for us because it shows us that Democrats are excited. They're coming to the polls. We are outpacing Republicans in voting, even in Duval County, where we have more Republican primaries than Democratic primaries. We still have more Democrats voting there. And I think it gives us a little insight into what November will be like. So we're excited, we're ready, and we're looking forward to having our full slate of Democrats that will be on the ballot in November.
So sometimes parties look at a primary and say, hey, it's kind of a dry run or a test run for what happens in November. What about some of the big national things going on? Does that influence what happens here in the Florida primary?
You know, I think in the Florida primary, not so much. I truly believe that all politics is local. And I think we're seeing that now more than ever because so many decisions are being left to our local governments. Whether your local school is going to reopen, whether you have a mask ordinance that's mandatory, police funding, so many issues that we are seeing in Florida are actually being left to your local government. And so I think what we're seeing in this, what we're going to see in the primary is that the national conversation really is not going to have much of an impact on who your city commissioner is or who your tax collector is or your local mayor. That is really happening at a hyper local level.
Even so, doesn't it generate some momentum or interest for voters, even on those down ballot races or the primary races, when you hear something like an announcement this week we saw from Joe Biden saying Kamala Harris is going to be his VP pick?
Oh, absolutely. I think voters are extremely excited about the Biden-Harris ticket, and we are driving turnout from the top down and from the bottom up on this ticket for Democrats. And so we are absolutely seeing the excitement there. I think that the Democratic message of our values is really starting at the top. The tone is being set by the Biden-Harris campaign, this whole fighting back for the soul of our nation. And our candidates down ballot are adopting that messaging, and it's working.
When it comes to what's happening leading up to Tuesday's vote, are there local races? Are there individual races that Florida Democratic Party gets involved in and says, hey, we'll help, we'll try and get voter turnout up? And specifically, you mentioned Duval County as a place where some of that's happening, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, Florida, we do not get involved in primary races, and there is a primary in Duval and HD 14. We have 2 Democrats running there. Really looking forward to who comes out of that race. But yes, we are training our candidates. We have plenty of resources that they have access to by way of campaign tools and data support and access. And we will be investing in some of these races as well, down ballot, really ensuring that we can win down ballot. So really electing Joe Biden is just the beginning. It is not enough. We need Democrats to win down ballot. And that's what the elections department at the party is focused on, is on some target races that we can win. And there's some exciting ones happening right there in Duval.
One of the races we follow is Congressional District 5, because it seems like whoever wins on Tuesday in the Democratic primary is probably the winner of that congressional seat. Is that the way you see it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That is certainly our seat, and we are going to do everything we need to do to keep it that way. There's also an exciting race, Kent, with Donna Deegan. I know that's a plus 16 Republican congressional district there, but Donna is fantastic. Her team is, I would not put anything past her team. They are extremely organized, very vigilant, and I'm going to be interested to see what happens in that race as well.
There's been lots of talk about voting by mail, and for all the pushback that President Trump has made, he went out of his way to say that's not the case in Florida. What would you say to voters who did that or are thinking, hey, for the general election, I want to vote by mail?
I think that President Trump's backtracking specifically for Florida just shows how good of a job we're doing with vote by mail in Florida. Democrats are we've been organizing at this since 2019, and our numbers are even scaring Republicans that Donald Trump has to backtrack and say, in Florida, it's safe to vote by mail. It is absolutely safe to vote by mail in Florida. It has been done for a very long time. And I think at this point, Democrats have such a big advantage in vote by mail enrollment that it'll lead us to a win in November.
In local races, Democrats are battling for several state rep seats in the area. And you'll find Republicans candidates dominating the ballots on races like sheriff in Clay County, the county commission, also several races in St. John's. We've got a great tool for you. When you go to newsforjax.com, you can find our voters guide. And as many of the candidates has responded to us, you'll get their profile and what they're all about. Go to the voters guide on newsforjax.com. All right, next time, we're going to look at what happened in the primary and explore what it all means for the final 70-plus days of election 2020. This Week in Jacksonville airs each Sunday morning at this time. I'm Kent Justice. We thank you for watching on air on Channel 4 and the CW17, and you can find us online, again, at newsforjax.com.
Every day, more people are choosing News 4 Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.